Okay, here we are. This is the first class of EPSY 6330. Let's go to the pad. In order to get information, about the class, I'm new with this pad, so how do I get rid of that? How do I get rid of that? I'll just keep writing. Go to that website. It's www.uh.edu/tilde. That's a little squiggly mark at the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard. DLIBERMA. Don't put the N in there. I'm not sure why. Okay, it has to do with the number of characters. That is actually not the website for the course, but when you go there, you will see the websites for the 3 courses that I have online. Click on EPSY 6330, and you can do it. And you can write down, I don't remember it now, I just use this one because it's easier for me. Just write down the website number, and you can go to 6330. Okay, is that enough? Let's leave it for another second. Okay, this is a tilde over here, right? That's what that should be, a tilde. Okay, it's at the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard. Okay, come back to me. Okay, on that website, I'm trying to go to the next page. Haven't been able to do it. On that website, you will see, okay, all of the, okay, maybe I won't need this anymore. You will see all of the information that you need, including the syllabus, what we're going to do, the tests. The dates of the tests are not on there. Okay? And for those of you taking on television, the broadcast times. Okay, if the broadcast times are not on there when you first click on, just be patient. They'll be put up there, okay? There's also an email address on the web page about where to write. Okay, there'll be 2 mail addresses. One will be my email address for this that I use for courses. You can ask me questions about the intellectual content. And then there'll be an email address that is handed. There's always an upper-level doctoral student who handles all the technical aspects of the course. Okay? Don't write to me about that. It's not that I'm nasty or that I want to talk to you about it. I just don't know anything about it. Okay? I don't handle the technical aspects of the course with good reason. It's not my forte. If it were, I'd be the dean or the provost. This way, I can't. I'm not an administrator. It's not my thing. And it's easier this way. Okay? In addition, okay, so you will see everything you need to do there. Basically, there are written assignments that will be corrected by me and, again, a couple of the upper-level doctorals, a couple of the doctoral students. If you have any questions about you don't like your grade or something, you think it's too high, you want it lowered or something like that, okay, don't write to me. I will review it. But first, send it to the course email address, and the doctoral student who's running it, I don't want to mention names, I don't want to date the tapes. The doctoral student who is running it will put us in contact, and we'll get a time of mutual convenience to meet. Okay, if you have a problem. Usually it's not a problem. The agreement among all the rate scores is very high. We have training sessions where we do that, so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, there's a final, a midterm and a final, and once again, you will see the information about where they are, etc., etc. For those of you who are taking the course on TV or via tape purchase, once again, if you can't make the times, there's all the information on there about how that works, so don't worry about it. Okay, regarding the written assignments, I want to tell you that the books are on there, and as of when this tape is being made, I'm not sure about subsequent semesters, I can't tell you, but at least one of the books, you need to buy new books, and they're destructible. I will tell you why now. Okay, it's to hold the price down. In other words, there's a sheet that you need to tear out of the book. You need to buy a new book, which the sheet hasn't been torn out. You need to tear the sheet out of the book and hand it in. The reason for that is to keep the books cheap. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'll tell you a little how this works. Okay, most of you have noticed that whenever there's a textbook that's used, it's the first edition, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and you'll notice that the editions overlap a lot. Anybody ever had to buy, that you were assigned the fifth edition for the course and you bought the fourth edition, it was more or less okay? Usually there isn't too much, I'm not taking it, sorry, usually there isn't too much that has changed. The reason for that has to do with the economics of textbooks. Okay, in general, bookstores take around a third. About a third is their profit. They mark up the books about a third for profit and overhead and all the other stuff, right? Pay the employees, right? Anybody ever bought a textbook for $100? Sell it back to the store, right? $100, $110. How much do they give you for it usually? 30, 40, right? Then they sell it back for 65, 70, 80, right? The profit margin on used books is enormous. You can see it's 100%, 200%, it's much more, right? So bookstores, and that's just how life is. It's good. It's what's made this country great, okay? They prefer used books, okay? Of course, those are terrible because they make much more money on them. Those are terribly damaging to the people who are publishing the books. If you had a book out for 6 or 7 years, by the end, the book company would be losing money on it because most of the books would be used, right? And there's a fierce competition over this. We often get books. I don't ask for them. People just send me copies. Please adopt this book. So they're lying around, and there's somebody who comes and says, "You want to buy a book?" And from their eyes, I can tell they'll give me $12, $14 for it. Sell it back to the bookstore for double. So that's a good profit margin for them, probably something. I don't know the exact figures, but for more. The bookstore turns around, it's a brand new book, it's never been used, and sells it for, it's a $120 book or an $80 book, they'll sell it for $65, right? So everybody makes a bundle, except the publisher. I don't do it anyway, I don't sell them the books. One time I'm in my office, and one of these used book salesmen is around, he's there, and a representative of a new book, of a company that publishes the new books, she's walking down the hall and sees him. She gets a look on her face like, he stepped in something in the street and was tracking it all over the brand new carpet, right? They just really don't like each other. So this book, as you read my books, you will notice they have content you cannot get in a standard textbook. They have a lot of naysaying, right? Like there's a whole article questioning the whole notion of attention deficit disorder, whether it really exists or not. There are books talking about applications. There are several articles in the book. You're not going to be sent all of them, questioning the whole issue of IQ. Then there are articles that talk about application, issues that get more deeply into theory. And I went, and the publisher I use actually is an academic who himself wanted to publish books, and he couldn't get them published because it was a wide market. So he went to a press and eventually opened his own publishing company. He's an academic for a while. He was the chair of a department, actually was the dean of a community college. So he's an academic, and he came and he was publishing some of his books, and he's in history and geography, some of those. And I came to him and I said I want to do it in psychology, and actually we've worked together building, the social science end of the company. Of his publishing enterprise, and the purpose was to keep the books inexpensive, right? And he said to me, look, there are two things I can do. Either we can put out several editions, we can charge X amount for the book, we can charge much more for the book, and we'll have to put out new editions. By the way, let me tell you that in general, when a new edition comes out, the other one's already in preparation, because they have to come out every 2-3 years, otherwise you lose money. So we said we can do that. Or if you promise me that every semester all your students will buy the books, and I can count on the market for however many students you have, right, that they'll buy new books, I can lower the price of the book by about 40%. So that's what I've done. You will notice when you go to buy the books, they are much less expensive than the typical used book in the bookstore, okay, and they're new. That's why I do it, to keep them cheap. If you have taken another course in which you have used one or both of the books, do not buy another book. The purpose of this is to keep the books inexpensive, not to say we have to buy the books twice. If you've done that, look on the web page. It will tell you what to do if you're in that situation. Okay, and there are some people who've taken undergraduate courses with me. The book is used in a few other courses. So, and there are even some other universities that have used the books. So if you're in that situation, still have the book, do not buy a new one. Okay, let me just tell you that the royalties that I get from the book and that Dr. Gourlaud gets from the books and the other books, right? They're all the royalties are donated to a fund. I feel safe in saying this, that you're not supposed to date anything in the tape, but I can't imagine that for as long as the tape won't be true. A scholarship fund for single parents with custody. Okay, to help them. I used to be one of those, and it's a rough go. So we're doing that. Right as the semester this tape is being made, you have to have $10,000 before it starts to throw off money. We're not there yet. So if anyone wants to donate, send me the email, and I'll be glad to tell you how to do it. And I'm hopefully so. But that's the purpose of it. So please, if you have any questions, you can write, but that's why we do it. And the books have been kept for years. The books were at the same price. Now the last several years, they were a little bit more than the original price because we put on a second edition, a printing cost, and this and that, all that kind of stuff. Everything goes up. But we're trying to hold a line. And I try to pick very classic articles so that they wouldn't be out of date, and we'll see what happens, okay? Now, all the rest is on the web page. If you have any questions, I can't answer questions, even the students taking the course live. You can ask me questions before or after, but I can't do it because it's making a tape. But send emails. If you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer. If you have any questions about, let me give you one more number. Well, you already know. Okay, I was going to say here, I'll put one number on here. How do I get a new page? Somebody come and show me. Change tablet and pen settings.
File new.
No. They show me how. Here comes the boss. Show me where it is. Which one is it? Oh, just page down?
Right there.
There we go. Okay, I got it. Call 281 2. What am I doing here? What did I do? I screwed up everything. Earn. Don't push that. Earn as you learn. 281-395-2800, and they'll have technical information about tape purchases, etc. And about television broadcast times. I assume if you're watching this already, you know, but just in case. Okay, for the students taking it live, it's probably not necessary. Okay, come back to me. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to give you a few class rules. This includes people, I'm holding you on your honor, people are watching this on television or by tape. Every once in a while, I'm going to call for a vote. When I ask for a vote, you have to vote. None of this, well, I'm thinking about it, or vote. Okay? That's one rule. Okay? That's the only rule I'm going to give you for now. Okay? So, what we're going to do is we're going to take some votes here. And we're going to take some votes about science and the nature of science. Okay? Before we take that vote, let me tell you what I'm up to in this class. Look, how many people have ever had an education course before? Raise your hand here. Tons of people in here, and I assume a lot of people taking the course, right? Most of the course that you take in education, and you'll see this in the intro to the course on the syllabus when you get on the webpage, are methods courses. How? I used to be a teacher in school. Believe me, if you're taking those courses, listen. They are very, very important courses. But this course is going to be asking other questions like why? How do you know? What do you mean by that? Not how do you teach that, but why are you teaching that? Does that make sense? Okay? And of course, the answer to that often depends on what you're up to. Okay? Let's try it here. Those of you who are taking this by tape, I want you to turn it off for a second, and I want you to think about this, but we're going to solicit some answers here. live. What is the job of an educator? Or if you're, and to me, education is a broad definition. It's administrators, it's anybody who's trying to change thinking or behavior or approaches. It's teachers, it's counselors, it's whoever. What are you trying to achieve? Let's start with, and you just tell me your field and what do you think the purpose is? Let's start with teachers. What's the goal of a school? What should school be doing? Be certain, okay, go ahead, push it down, okay?
Facilitate teaching.
Facilitate, what field are you in?
I'm in science.
Science, okay. Well, what should a science, what's the job of a teacher? What are you trying, what's the goal of education, let's say, in a school? To do what? You can't be wrong here because there are different opinions. Go ahead.
To transfer.
No, you have to push it down, hold it down.
To transfer knowledge.
Okay, transfer knowledge. That's one approach. Go ahead. You have to push it down and hold it down.
To teach a student to think for themselves.
Okay, now those are two different approaches. One said transfer knowledge. One said students should think for themselves. Those are two different approaches. They may or may not be contradictory. You're going to have to decide yourself. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. Hold it down, hold it down, hold it down. There's that little black thing's a microphone. No, right in front of you. There's a little black microphone. See it? On the table. See it?
I'm sorry.
Okay, and push it down so people can hear you. There you go. Does she have it? There's a button. See it? Here, show her how to do it. Okay. Hold it and push it and keep holding it down while you're talking so they can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I think the goal of a teacher is to facilitate learning and to inspire students.
To facilitate learning and inspire students, yet another one. Now, some of you may see, does part of the inspiration include having students decide for themselves what they want to learn? I'm asking you.
Can you repeat the question?
Does part of that inspiration include having the students decide for themselves what they want to learn?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I say that because in order for the student to be more motivated, they need to have some input in the educational process.
Okay. Now that sounds to me, I may be wrong, but it sounds to me like that there's some contradictions between that and transferring a predetermined set of knowledge. So the question is, why are you doing what you're doing? Even the people, how many people think that transferring knowledge, I don't want to be is a very important part of education, that it's a prime goal? Okay, a lot of you. But I'll bet all of you have a limit. Suppose I tell a person, I'm going to humiliate you, tease you, bother you, have the other kids gang up on you until you learn this stuff. How many people think, and the kid didn't learn it, now he learns it, how many people think that that's a good idea? Who thinks it's a lousy idea? You have to vote. Everybody. Why? Why? I have the knowledge, I want the kid to learn it, and I did it. What's wrong with it? Go ahead.
It's not a humanistic approach.
Okay, which means what?
Which means that everything that we do in society has a correct formula to do it. You can't just drum everything that you want in kids' heads.
Why not? I got the kid to learn it. What's wrong with that? Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. I saw a hand over there. In the yellow blouse. Didn't you raise your hand? Didn't you raise your hand? Okay, go ahead. What's wrong with that?
I think it's not fair for a student to have to learn under duress. That's the main problem.
Okay, so, you know, people, said duress. We're a little worried about kids' mental health, too, at least some. I'm not so sure how much, right? We've had a lot of people wondering about, what's this, the TOS test, what's the new, the tacky test, whatever it is, right? Kids under tremendous duress. That was supposed to be funny, the tacky test, but that's what I call it. Anyway, so you have to wonder about, mental health. So there are all kinds of problems. What are you trying to achieve? What's the goal of education? Is it mental health? Is it transferring knowledge? Is it trying to get kids to think for themselves? And sometimes those things are contradictory. How much should the kids decide? Transfer what knowledge? We're going to see some people say, it really doesn't matter much what kids learn, as long as they learn how to think. To get them to think. Other people are going to say, no, it's very important. There's certain things we have to do. Okay? And I want to tell you, these are not easy questions. It's easy just sort of bumble along and do what you're supposed to do without thinking about them, but I don't want you to do that. I want you to think about it. For instance, watch this one. How many people think that it's one important thing for schools to do is to give kids skills that they will need to function as adults in society? Who thinks that's important? Just about everybody. You must be kidding me. Let's try this again. How many people think that computer skills are an important part of that? Raise your hand. Everybody. How many people think I have this 12-year-old in my class that I can give him, I'll tell you why I looked at my watch in a second, that I can give him the skills that he will need to be proficient on a computer when he's 42, 30 years from now? Anybody think I can do that? How many people think that 95% of what I will teach them about computers will be junk 30 years from now? So how can I teach people the skills that they need? How can I possibly do that? We have no one. Let me tell you something. Nobody taught me how to use computers when I was in school because they didn't exist. But I have typewriter skills you wouldn't believe. I remember the teacher sat there in typing class. Anybody ever see these erasers with a round eraser at one end and a brush at the other? They don't think to tell them anymore. Those are typewriter erasers. And what you do is you erase with a wheel, and then you have all kinds of garbage that would fall into the typewriter. And that would mess up these were the typewriters that went like this, one key at a time, not IBM balls. So the teacher used to sit there and said, if that gets in there, it clogs up your typewriter. So after you erase, you have to take the brush and brush it away. She used to go, brush up. And she'd get out of her seat, brush up. Brush up. Right? We used to sit there, brush up. It's junk now. How to make carbon copies. Ooh, that was important without making a mess. No, but let's Xerox. Or just print out 4 copies. It's very difficult to do. So you got to think about this. Think for yourself. Does that mean you're going to allow the kids to disagree with you? You're allowed to disagree with me all you want. I have my opinions. Right? So some of you have been teachers, some are thinking of being the teachers' counselors. We have several counselors. If you were studying to be a counselor or some other mental health type person, there are disagreements. Is it to make people, there are some people who will tell you it's to make people feel better. Emotional health. But other people say, I want the person to engage, and I don't care how you feel. I want you to engage in what they call pro-social behaviors. I don't care if it makes you miserable to do what you're supposed to do. I want you to do what you're supposed to do. That's often the school's approach. Right? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to achieve? Now, I admit to you, a lot of this is going to be in terms of schools, because that's my background. I'm not a counselor, etc. But we're going to take a look at this. Now, we're going to try to, and I want you to try to get a philosophy of what you're trying to accomplish. Okay? Has anybody here been a teacher for more than 7, 8 years? Anybody in here? Not too many people. Does anybody know about the TEKS? I think they changed the name. The essential skills. What do they call it now?
There's still the TEKS.
TEKS, what does it come from? Texas
Essential Knowledge and Skills.
Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. Obviously, if it's essential, it stays the same for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? No, it changes every 4 or 5 years. So it was essential, it's essential, but not anymore. So this was essential when your oldest kid was in 7th grade. Now your youngest kid's in 7th grade, it's not essential anymore. I call this the theory of the revolving gospel. This is gospel truth for now. Well, what made it essential 5 years ago or last year, and it's not essential now? We're changing books. If you dare to assign something out of the old book, it's heresy. Last year it was with the religion. This year it's heresy. How do you decide what to teach? How do you know what to teach? Of course, the way we do it in our schools is we decide what's useful. So for instance, we don't, math, 2-3 years of math is required. Music, not at all. That's because when you turn on the radio, you hear a bunch of math formulas. You don't hear music, right? People in daily life use math all the time and they're not involved with music, right? I'm being sarcastic, you got it all right? I mean, I don't get it. Why is algebra or advanced that nobody uses so important and music that's around us all the time? Not important. So these are difficult questions. So what I want you to do is sort of try to, I'm going to use the psychology, which is the course that I'm teaching here, to try to at least get at some of those issues, to show you different approaches to what people are. And we'll get to that, and to what education ought to be, to what counseling ought to be, to what administrators ought to be trying to accomplish, to what any people who interact with other people as part of their job is trying to change other people, teach them something, get them to be a different way to do. Okay, but before we do that, we got to ask a question. Here's my question. Science. Science. Okay, let's go to the... let's not go there yet. We're going to write stuff down and then we'll go to it. Okay? I'm going to mention some areas of human endeavor, and we're going to take a vote. You have to vote about whether those areas of science are, or those areas of endeavor are or not a science. I'm going to write it down here and then we'll see the list later. Okay, the first one, physics. Is physics a science? Who votes yes? Vote out there. Who votes? Oh, I pushed this thing. I think I messed it up. No, I didn't. Who votes no? Anybody? You vote no?
Yes. I vote yes.
Okay, he voted yes. All right, let's try another one. Biology. Is biology a science? Who votes yes? Looks like unanimous in here. Anybody vote no? No, it's unanimous. Let's try another one. This ought to be easy. Political science. No, don't go to here yet. Don't go there yet. Sammy. Political science. Who votes yes? 3-4 hands. Who votes no? Gee, just about nobody. It says political science, for goodness sake. Oh, I'm just writing this down. Theology. Who votes yes? Just a couple of people. Who votes no? I'm watching you. Everybody, most people voted no. Let's try one more. No, a couple more. Astrology, not astronomy, astrology. When the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter. Don't panic. I sing all the time in class. Concerts are free. There's no extra charge. You don't have to worry. Like, what's your sign? My sign is no left turn. What's your sign? All that stuff. Astrology. Who thinks astrology is a science? Who votes yes? Got about 4 or 5 hands. Who votes no? Did you vote? Well, we have one person who's dropping the class. How are you voting? You're not sure? You'll say yes. Okay. Anybody else not sure? Okay, and let's try, you know where this is all going, don't you? Psychology. Who votes yes? Who votes no? So we got about 50-50. Okay, now here's my question. How do you know? How do you know? What makes something a science? What makes an area of human endeavor a science? Go ahead.
A specific requirement to be a scientific.
That's right. I want to know what those requirements are.
Okay, number one is that an experiment should be reproducible, which means you have to produce it again.
Okay, wait. So let's go to the pad. Okay. So first he's saying we're doing experiments. That's right. Science gathers data. Do experiments. That's what separates science from philosophy. We do experiments. Number 2. Are you pushing it down? Push it down, push it down. Go ahead.
How about hypothesizing first and then trying to...
Okay. We have, okay, let's go back to this. So we have hypotheses, usually, based on theories. Okay. Anything else that makes something a science? Just gather data? It's not, yeah. Go ahead.
It's universal.
What? Say it.
Global, everybody accepts.
Well, push it down, push it down, push it down. Oh, dang. Go borrow one from somebody. Just stand here. Okay. Just stand up and push it. Go ahead. There you go.
It's universal and it's kind of a global concept that everybody accepts, and it's, like you said, able to replicate and reproduce, and it's constant.
Okay, come back here. I'm going to put that up here. You'll know why later. Okay, anything else? Gee, I like this thing. Anything else? Go ahead. Push it down.
Falsifiable.
Okay, well, there's certain... Yeah, it's falsifiable. Okay, I'll put that down. I almost didn't because I forgot how to spell it. Falsifiable. There we go. Is that right? Looks good. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Proof how?
Your hypothesis should be proved by the experimentation.
By the experiment. Okay, so let's try this. I want to do an experiment as to whether this elixir cures, makes people's memories better. This medicine. So I go out and I give it to 500 people, and 467 say, made my memory better. Is that a good scientific experiment? No, that stinks. Right? So, all of these things, I'll tell you why. Let me just give you the answer, because everything that everybody said is true. Let's go back to the page. The summary of this global concept, which is absolutely correct, is the scientific method. We agree, stay on this page, the scientific, where's the eraser? There's the eraser. I just made it worse, didn't I? Wait a minute, I'm learning how to do this. Just be patient. Whoa! Look at this. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. There's the eraser. Oh, what did I mess up here? No, okay. The scientific method. Come back to me. That we agree to do our experiments, have our hypotheses, draw our conclusions using the scientific method. Okay, that's the key. All right, so let's go back here to this page. Okay, does physics use the scientific method? The answer is yes. Does biology? Yes. Was complete. Theology? No. So theology is not a science because, come back to me, theology doesn't do experiments. Theology is part of philosophy. It doesn't do experiments. We don't say, okay, we're going to do this experiment. If it comes out this way and we can replicate it, there is a God. If it comes out that way and we can't, there isn't a God. Now let's say it comes out there is a God. Okay, well, now we're going to do an experiment. If it comes out this way, that this is a true religion. If it comes out that way, that's a true religion. Obviously not. Now the reason I pick on theology, I should have put that before political science, is that theology, that doesn't mean there are no standards in theology. There are standards in theology. Okay? We don't just say, okay, let's say I take two essays in Christian theology, we'll just biggiterize it. And I give them those essays to 25 renowned, well-known, very competent Christian theologians. All 25 of them say, essay A is very good. Good theological argument. Essay B stinks. It's terrible. Now, if I go take those two essays to train Hindu and Buddhist and Jewish and Muslim and other theologians and ask them, they will come to the same conclusions. All of them will say, they may say, look, I don't agree with the underlying premises of the Christian religion, but given those premises, A is good and B stinks. Okay, now I'm not a theologian, so I can't tell you what they are, but there are standards. They're just not science, because you're not gathering data. Let's go back to the overhead, or to the astrology. Astrology is not. Astrology gathers evidence, right? What's your birthday? What was the planet rising? Where were you born? When were you born? What was the planet rising? What year were you born? It gathers evidence. But astrology is not a science because, oh, I did this again. I keep hitting this damn thing. Because astrology, come back to me now, does not gather evidence in accordance with the scientific method. Okay? It just doesn't. Nothing wrong with that. Just doesn't. Okay? And indeed, astrology often uses evidence that is unacceptable to scientists, like personal testimonies. That we'll get to that. Now, let me give you tell you something that happened. The scientific method took a long time to develop. Okay? A long time to develop. Wasn't that easy. Much of what is part of the scientific method came about because of lousy evidence. Bad mistakes. For instance, for a long time, scientists would say, okay, I think I have a pill. And let's say it's a pill for pain, or a pill for anxiety, right? A pill for anxiety. Everyone about pain pills. This pill reduces pain 35% better than the other pill. Ever see those commercials? How do they know? Do they have a painometer they stick on your head and this one goes up 35% less than the other one? What the heck is that? I mean, what's going on here? What do you mean 35% less? We have a measure of pain. You have 27 units of pain here. I just stick your finger in there and it shows it. You know, on our painometer. Well, they ask people. 35% more people said. Who knows? But what happened, they used to go, let's say this reduced anxiety. So they give this group a pill, and this group they wouldn't give a pill, and the people with the pill said it reduces my anxiety. They don't do that anymore. What do? We give group A the pill, and group B we give a, who knows what here? Let's go back to the overhead, or to the tablet. We call it placebo. A sugar pill. I'll tell you why, okay? Come back to me. I am now going to give you a demonstration of a person. I used to work in a clinic. I still work with them once in a blue moon, but I had an office in a clinic. There was a whole bunch of therapists and me. I did the education part. I used to say they do shrinking. They worry about shrinking. I worry about thinking. But nobody laughs at that joke, but I tell it anyway. Okay? I did the education part. A lot of people, they would come out of anxiety and they were behind in school, and they said, so I would work with them. One day going to the clinic, I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. There's a guy sitting there in the waiting room like this. He's kicking his legs. Of a bad movie. The Three Stooges, right? What happened? This guy had been. Go ahead. What happened? Thank you. This guy had been for years on 1/4 milligram of Valium. Taking 1/4 milligram of Valium is like trying to cure a headache by taking your finger, rubbing it across the aspirin, and licking it on your tongue. It is what is called a subclinical dose. It's like trying to get the Pacific Ocean red by dropping a bottle of red food dye in it, right? It has no effect. A small dose of Valium is 5 milligrams. There's 1/4 milligram. But what happened? Matter of fact, the psychiatrist told me when he first took it to the store, when he first took the prescription to the store, let me check something here, sorry. When he first took the prescription to the store, I knew I messed something up. Okay? Someday we'll have a record about hearing aids in the class. Hearing aids don't work like glasses. And people who have hearing aids, who have hearing problems, they can fool you, think they can hear, but often they can't. So if you're ever working with people with hearing aids, ask them how well they can hear and what's going on. Anyway, I can hear most things great except people's voices, so that's why I have these, okay? Other noises are great. So if you're talking and there's something buzzing in the background, I can hear the buzzing great, just can't hear you talk, okay? In any case, so when he first called, he said, you meant 25 milligrams, right? Or 40 milligrams, right? Not a fourth of a milligram. I said, no, because this guy was really anxious. They'll give 40 milligrams. I said, no, a quarter milligram. And it costs a lot of money because it's a prescription from a doctor. So we'd have to take a pill and chop it up into teeny little pieces, right? And take a tiny little piece and compound it into something, you know, with some sugar, with some other element. But it was there for real. Finally, the psychiatrist, costing the guy a lot of money, was driving the pharmacist crazy. So he said, or he'd take 10 pills and then put them together and then chop them up into 50 or 60 different ones. And he said, I have a brand new pill. It'll work great. Just came here, take a bottle of them. And what we saw, he said, I got samples taken, was 2 days after he got that pill, right? That's what we saw. This guy putting on this crazy show, right? Like they're doing this. The truth is he didn't believe it. He knew that if he got a prescription and went to the pharmacy and the pharmacist gave it to him, that it was real medicine. He didn't believe this pill that the doctor's giving out of a desk. Something was wrong with this. And this is real Valium. The doctor made up a name for it, right? I think he said the word for sugar in Greek or something, but you know, that's called a placebo effect. People who take medicine think that is, right? Well, this is not a course in science, but you know, we know that that comes from bitter experience, blind testing. If I tell you, if I take a bunch of my friends, a bunch of my graduate students who work with me, and the ones who, and I've worked for 100 years on this, I've worked for 15 years on this pill for cold symptoms. Let's see if it really makes cold symptoms best. And they know who got the pill and who got the placebo. The odds are they're going to say, oh yeah, the pill works. But if you take people who don't know who got what, often the pill doesn't work. This is all from hard experience, the scientific method. And inside the scientific method, part of the scientific method, which by the way is a branch of philosophy, is using proper logic. Okay? Now this is not a course on the scientific method, and although we probably everybody here took one, including me, but you have to be very, very careful. Science has drawn a lot of conclusions that were incorrect. Right? And the scientific method is all theoretically up for grabs every time something happens where you get conclusions that are not correct. It's true. Now, what happened is that physics and chemistry and later biology decided they could get the most reliable, valid results that they could trust by using the scientific method. And then some people came along and they learned a lot. Oh, boy. Physics is our most developed science. We know a lot from physics, right? We have postmodernists who are writing, physics is all just a construct of Western thinking. It's culturally biased. Of course, they turn on the light and turn on the computer, and right on the computer, all of these inventions made based on using principles of physics, right? That they're ready to do, but they're ready to use. So it's very, very powerful science. Some people came along and said, you know what? What if we used the scientific method to try to understand people? To try to understand how people function as individuals and in groups. And they eventually we got what were called the social sciences. Okay? Does anyone know what the social sciences are? Go push it down. Go ahead. You got them?
Sociology.
What?
Sociology.
Sociology is one. Who else has one? Go ahead.
Psychology.
Psychology. Bless you. Who else? What else? Anthropology. It used to be that sociology dealt with modern societies and anthropology dealt with quote-unquote primitive societies, non-Western societies. Today they both deal with both, but they have slightly different approaches. What else? I have to ask my daughter. She's an anthropology major. I don't know anything about the differences. What else? You got another one?
Geography.
Yeah, that's a good one. Geography is often considered a subdiscipline. When they list the five, geography is considered a subdiscipline of history, of history sometimes, and history is one. There are actually six. Some historians say they're social scientists, and some say they're not. Political science, we already had that on the list, and economics. And as I said, some historians. I studied in a history department where basically they threatened to throw us out of the college and have us mugged in an alley if we ever said that history was a science. Because we don't use scientific, we use something else. But some historians use scientific approaches, some use other approaches. There are standards, but they use other approaches, right? Now, by the way, let me explain. Okay, so the idea of finding, those are the 5 social sciences. Here, let's go back here, I'll show them to you. Let's go back to the overhead. It's political science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and economics. And I'll write history small. Okay, yes and no. Some people say history yes, some say no. Okay, come back to me. Now what? Now that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways. The arts, literature gives us insights into humans. Right? Music gives us insight into humans. Literature gives, all things give us insight into humans, but this was the idea. Now, of course, the truth is that this is a very difficult thing to do, okay? It's a lot easier. Physics has a lot easier job than psychology. I don't say, what, are you crazy? Look, I know that one carbon atom is different from another carbon atom, but not the way one person is different from another person. If you're going to try to make general rules about carbon atoms, that's a lot easier than making general rules about people. So it's tough. And also, physics has been around for 300-400 years. We've only been around for about 100, so it's harder. And the truth is that it's also difficult to do controlled experiments. Like, for instance, we know that when you do a scientific experiment, you divide people into groups at random, right? So I want to do a scientific experiment. Here we go. I got my random designator here. Here it is. Where is it? It's a nickel, okay? So I want to find out if having an alcoholic parent has a certain effect on, if having an alcoholic parent makes people behave differently in a certain area than not having an alcoholic parent. So I randomly assign to groups, okay? Heads, alcoholic parent. Tails, non-alcoholic parent, right? Tails, non-alcoholic parent. Heads, alcoholic parent. I mean, what are you talking about? You can't do that. Makes it very difficult. So we have correlations. We try to see, well, the vast majority of people who smoke, there's a very, very high incidence of smoking, of smokers who get lung cancer versus non-smokers. But there are a lot of people who get lung cancer who don't smoke. A good friend of mine died from lung cancer, never smoked. Or I would put it this way, hadn't smoked for 30 years. And other people who smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke and smoke don't get cancer. Both of my grandfathers were chain smokers. One I never knew because he died from, my father says, this was my mother's father, he had cancer of the esophagus, stomach, lungs, and probably lip and tongue when he died. My other grandfather died when he, according to his immigration papers, he was 87, but he was probably older, probably well into his 90s, smoked like a chimney. And he died from he just heart wore out, something, I don't know. Okay, you say, well, see, he could have lived to be 96 instead of 92 if he hadn't smoked, but it obviously, so who knows? You can't randomly assign people to smoking and not smoking, or to genders. Heads, you're a female, tails, you're a male. Can't do that. So it becomes difficult, and we wander up, but at least we try. Now, there's one other thing I have to tell you about science here. We have to distinguish in physics between science and application of science, between what I call physicists and technologists in physics, okay? By the way I'm using the term, and it's the way theoreticians often use it, although not always, usually use it, let me put it that way. By my definition, Thomas Edison was not a scientist. He was a brilliant technologist. He really didn't discover any principles of physics. What he did is take what the physicists had found out and applied them. He said, well, if this is true and that's true and this is true, then if I do this and this and this and this and turn this handle, I ought to be able to talk into this, turn the handle, and the voice will come back. He invented the record player in his spare time. If what the physicists say is true, then there ought to be something that will glow continuously for hours and hours in a vacuum. What the Wright brothers said is, if this is true and that's true and this is true, then I ought to be able to do this and this and this and get heavier than air flight. By the way, you know, they've taken the specifications, they have built replicas of the Wright brothers' first plane. They don't fly. I think it was Orville who went up. They can't get him to fly, only he could get it to fly. But they fly, right? You understand what I'm saying? And that's why psychology, no matter how you voted, you're right. There are some people who say, I'm going to try to find theoretical principles of human behavior, of human thinking, of human judgment. They are trying to apply the scientific method. And there's some people who say, I'm going to try to apply those. Okay, given this and this and this, if I do this, it ought to make people learn. That's teachers, right? Or if I do this and this and this and this, it ought to make people less anxious. So counseling psychologists are really not scientists in the strict sense, but they should be basing what they do on science. They're trying to apply the principles of science to what's going on. And they disagree with each other because they come from different theoretical approaches. So what I want to do, yeah, go ahead.
Why they call psychology hybrid science?
Well, it's not a hybrid science. What I'm saying is some people who call themselves psychologists say, I'm going to use the scientific method. And some, like counseling psychologists or clinical psychologists, say, I'm not really a scientist. What I'm trying to do is apply scientific principles to making things happen. That's what teachers are hopefully doing too. I'm going to try to apply principles of human thinking, development, and emotions to try to get certain things to happen. Right? I'm sort of the technologist of psychology, if you will. Now, just ever so briefly, what basically has happened in physics, well, I take that back. We'll do that later. So what we need to do is look at science, and what I am particularly interested in is violations of the scientific method. Now, let me tell you a few things. My professor told me when I graduated, she said there are only two things that you have to do, and I got a job in academia. She said there are only two things you have to do to be a successful teacher in college. She said, one, read a chapter ahead of the students, and two, admit your prejudices up front. Okay? So, the second one's a lot harder than the first one. Okay? So I will tell you one prejudice. I think astrology is a bunch of baloney. What did Archie say? It's crapola. But that's just my opinion. The astrologists are straight up front. They tell you what I don't think it gives you any insight into the human condition at all. I think it's a bunch of junk. But, I said that already, didn't I? But, astrologers are honest about what they do. They tell you what they do. They tell you how they draw their conclusions. They tell you what elements go in. Take it or leave it. And that's fine with me. They're honest. I don't have any use for them, but they're honest. That's okay. What really annoys me, if you're a television fanatic, you may remember the old show Alice. Flo used to say, what really chaps my hide, right? Reading it are people who violate the principles of science and then go about saying, oh, using scientific sounding jargon and scientific sounding to pretend that they have scientific evidence. It goes on in education all the time. As a matter of fact, as far as I'm concerned, much of that drives what we do in education, and subsequently what we do to try to cure these problems that violate the scientific method, et cetera, et cetera. So what I want to do, rather than having a course in the scientific method, although maybe one day when I'm read all the old books that I used to read and do it again, right? I'll teach one, is try to look at violations of the scientific method, some principles that we don't want to use, and these are ones that I think are particularly prominent, if you will, in education in the field of surround education, administration, counseling, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go to the PowerPoint. Let's go to the PowerPoint, okay? So somebody back, oh, we got two people, good. And look at some of the violations of the scientific method. Is there a way you guys can get my picture in the screen? You know, I'm good looking, might as well put me on the screen there. Is there a way you can get my picture in the top of the screen there? They'll give it a shot. I know, okay. I know you're working on it. I just want to see if they could do it because I know things have changed. Okay, or what I call how to arrive at absolutely incorrect conclusions. Okay? Oh, if you want to convince friends in an argument that when you're wrong, you're right, this is how I can. And so here, or How to know things that just ain't so. At the beginning of the Think book, which I feel very confident will be one of the books in this course, there may be, that one will go on. There's a Artemus Ward, who was Lincoln's favorite humorist. There's a quote from him, and the quote says, "It's not what you don't know that hurts you, it's what you do know that just ain't so." And we can know, in quotes, a lot of things. We can arrive at conclusions about things that are not true by violating the scientific method. Now, I'm going to divide this. This is Lieberman's not so hot. Here, you're going to have to get my pictures out of there for a second. Not so hot division of violations that I want to talk about, and I'm going to give examples from education and other places, okay? As I said, I want to just use the word education, but I don't just mean schools. I mean all the people about education, counselors, and other kinds of things, okay? Unacceptable evidence and unacceptable explanations. I want to talk about the unacceptable evidence first. And we're going to talk about, now you can get my picture back if you want, 4 kinds of unacceptable evidence, okay? Anecdotal evidence, expert testimony, common sense, and common knowledge. The first one we're going to start with is anecdotal evidence. Let's see if I've still got a link. Oh, hallelujah. That's anecdotal evidence. You take my picture out for 1 second, there it is, anecdotal evidence. Okay? Anecdotal evidence is the same thing as personal testimony. That's just a fancy way to say personal testimony. Personal experience is not evidence. Okay? Now, we all know about this. Come back to me for a second. I tried Mama Jones, if your last name is Jones, I apologize, elixir of life, and it cured my lumbago, my psoriasis, my toothache, and my diabetes, or whatever else you had, right? You see that on the old Western shows of traveling medicine men. That's what they did. And then up come 40 people say, oh yeah, I took it and it cured this, I took it and it cured that, I took it and it cured this. Okay? That's anecdotes, that's personal evidence. And let me tell you, my friends, that stuff is extraordinarily powerful. The weight commercials. Take this and you'll lose 70 pounds. You get someone who weighs 432 pounds and can't walk. Next time you see someone, right? I took this medicine and that did it. I took this medicine and that did it. I took this pill, I took that pill. I used this machine, I used that machine. You see it over and over again, and it's anecdotal evidence. Let me tell you something that's a little more upsetting. There was a medicine, let's go to the pad, called Laetrile. Laetrile, okay, was a medicine for cancer. It was an extract of apricot pits, or apricot pits. Who says apricot? Who says apricot? Yeah, we got about 70-30 for apricot. Well, I say apricot. And it was supposed to be for, cure cancer, or at least alleviate the symptoms of cancer. And interestingly enough, the people who pushed it said, don't stop your regular treatment. So it wasn't an instead, right? So that, you know, the doctors didn't come say, oh my God, you're going to kill yourself. But it was an addition. And they had a lot of famous people. Does anybody know Steve McQueen, who Steve McQueen was? May remember him. Steve McQueen was a famous actor. He was in the original Thomas Crown Affair, which still has the longest kiss in the movies. He was in Bullet, the first movie where they had the camera on the car and you feel like you want to throw up following it, right? He was a very famous actor, and he got cancer. He died young in his 50s, right? And he swore that Laetrile helped him. There were busloads of people going to the border in Brownsville and in Tijuana, right, and in San Diego to go to Tijuana and Matamoros to get this pill. Thousands and thousands of people swore that Laetrile helped them. But when they did scientific experiments, this person takes Laetrile, this group takes Laetrile, and this group takes a sugar pill, and we examine the symptoms by people who don't know who took what. It never made a difference. You don't know who Steve McQueen was? He's in a bunch of movies. First one was Wanted, Dead or Alive. Very famous actor. He was married to Ally McGraw. Oh, this kind of, you don't know who she is either, do you? All right, you'll see, and what was another famous Steve McQueen movie? There was some real classic. You go ahead, what do you got?
Great Escape.
What?
The Great Escape.
The Great Escape. You've all seen The Great Escape? Right? You watch that on TV? He's the guy on the motorcycle. He's the American who plays the baseball and plans the escape. Right? Thank you. Steve McQueen was in that. You'll see it sooner or later. That's a great movie, by the way. James Garner's in it. That's a great. What else was he in?
Magnificent Seven.
The Magnificent Seven, right. There's another one you see running around all the time. Steve McQueen, he's a blonde guy. Anyway, and he got up and gave testimonies to Larry almost until he died. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. The problem with, they're good. Thanks. Is that people have different personal experience, and often they're not objective about these experiences. Objective about personal experiences, right? You just can't trust people's personal experiences. You need evidence. And personal success is not evidence. A particular learning technique may work great for you. This doesn't mean that it works for everyone in every situation. In fact, it may not work for most people in your particular teaching situation. One of the most common things that teachers do, they did actually think, when people first start teaching, what's the biggest influence on them? Not the courses they took, and not all the theories they studied, and not all the stuff they had in college about how the methods. It's how their teachers taught them. The teachers they liked taught them. I remember I had one thing, right, come back to me. I remember I was in college. I was in middle school or elementary school, and I couldn't understand how a river. Most rivers in America, fortunately, flow south or east and west. There are only a couple that flow north to south. Unfortunately, I grew up on one. The Genesee River, Rochester, New York. That's where I grew up. Anybody from Rochester? You're kidding me! People from Rochester, class guys, we got to talk about it. What high school did you go to? Put it down. Put it down. Put it down. Push it down so we can hear.
Aquinas Institute.
Aquinas, yeah, one of the best Catholic schools around here.
Penfield?
Penfield. I went to Irondequoit High. Hail, hail, Irondequoit, our alma mater dear. It's not so easy getting Irondequoit into a song, right? Now it's West Irondequoit. No kidding. So it's on the Genesee River. These are, Penfield's also, right, which flows out of the hills in Pennsylvania and through New York and into Lake Ontario. And I remember thinking, how can so there's the map, and the teacher showing us how to flow. How can it flow up? Right? You have to have the bad luck to grow up. No kidding. 2 people from around Rochester. All right. Okay. How could it flow up? And I couldn't get it. She said, no, it's not up. I've just put. Finally, the teacher took the map. She had me stay after class, and she puts the map on the ground. She said, see, this is how it's flowing. This is on the earth. And then she actually took some blocks and put them on the hills in Pennsylvania. So you see, it's flowing. We're just putting it up so everybody can see it. You got it? Oh, it was a revelation to me. So I'm teaching 7th grade. It was New York State history. A few years later, I'm teaching New York State history. There's Peter. I put it on the ground. He couldn't get it. He said, huh? How can it flow up? I should have shut my mouth because I was in New York City and there are no rivers there that flow north. The Hudson River flows north to south. That was easy, right? But we're studying about the Iroquois Indians. Anyway, it came up. Oh, no, I take it back. It was world history. And there's the Nile River. How can that be? How can it fly? That's one river that flows north to south, right? Starts out in the mountains in Central Africa and flows into the Mediterranean Sea. So I said, okay, I'll show you. So I put it on the floor. And I think it was 5th grade. I don't remember. He's looking at it. I said, you see it? And I built it up. He said, oh, I got it. So we're just hanging it up on the wall again. He said, wait a minute, Mr. Lieberman. Now it's flowing up again. How can it be, right? Didn't work. I tried it with 3 kids and none of them got it. The minute I hung it back up on the wall, no good. It's flowing up again. So I remember I said, and I shared a room with a high school teacher. I said, fine, don't worry. By the time they're in 11th grade, they'll figure it out. Okay? So just because it worked for me doesn't mean it works for the other kids. It was Peter and Miller and one other kid, right? Gee, I remember this all these years ago. Okay, so you have to be careful not to go from your own personal experience. Oh, it worked for me, it must be great for everybody. Right? Oh, this is the way I could study. This is the way everybody has to study. No, it's not true. Okay? So you have to be careful about personal testimony. Okay, the second one, is my link here? Oh my God, I lost my link back. Don't worry, I'm ready. Okay, the second one, I have to fix this up, is expert testimony. Okay? Expert testimony is not evidence. What people say is not to be believed simply because they are or claim to be experts. This includes principals, supervisors, professors, and everybody else. Okay? Experts, okay? Expert testimony is just not, it doesn't believe. If Albert Einstein and Sir Isaac Newton get out of their graves and come to us and say, look, we figured something out, this is the way the universe is, okay? What a true scientist would say, that's nice, Alan, Izzy, but I want your evidence. Evidence, 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 evidence. And one way we do this, well, this person is the leading expert in oh, this person has a doctorate in nutrition and says if you take the, I don't care. I want to see evidence. And people often try to push you around with evidence, right? With experts, not evidence, experts. This person is the expert, the leading expert in the field, right? Interesting enough, in America, we have a crazy approach to this. People who are experts or highly accomplished in one field suddenly become experts in another field. I'm going to stand up. Okay, ready? Yeah. Remember this commercial? There's Roger Clemens. I still remember this. You're not fully clean. He's there in his towel till you're zestfully clean. Remember that one? Snapping a towel. Roger Clemens. Well, I guess after the games he took a shower. So he's the expert on clean. What does Roger Clemens know about soap? What does he know about soap? Is he an expert? Or let me tell you something. If you have any interest in the environment and environmental issues and how things work, don't study biology. You're an idiot. Study singing and acting, because Congress brings Barbra Streisand and what's his name? Robert Redford to testify the environment. Stupid! Why did I study biology and forest ranger all these years? I should have been studying acting. Robert Redford takes walks in the woods. He's an expert. All of a sudden, people are experts on everything. How can that be? But even if you're, even in fields where you're an expert, look, I got to tell you something. In 1954 World Series, yes, I cut school to watch it, I admit it. I pretended I was sick. You just come back to me, okay? In the 1954 World Series, thanks, Willie Mays made the greatest catch in the history of baseball. There will never be a greater catch. I think it was the first inning of the first game, or it's in the first game. Vic Wertz, the first base, the Cleveland Indians were favored to win the World Series. They have two guys on, and they make this. And Rick Wertz smashes this ball to deep center field. That was the deepest center field of the old Cleveland Stadium. Willie Mays, kind of have to follow him. He turns around, his back's to the field, right? Turns around. He takes off at full speed. At the last minute, he looks up. The ball comes over his shoulder, and he catches it. Turns around, that was the end. Totally demoralized. The New York Giants won that World Series in 4 games. Killed him, right? Willie Mays was a great fielder. He was a great hitter. He was a great runner. He was a great, great baseball player. If Willie Mays gets on TV and says, take this glove, it will make you a much better outfielder. This is one of the greatest outfielders of all times. And then Mickey Mantle comes along, because Mickey's gone now, and says the same thing. And then, I don't know, Richard Hidalgo, another great fielder. And this one there, it's awfully hard to say I don't believe it. But I don't believe it. I want to see the evidence. If Akeem Olajuwon, remember he wore Converse sneakers, tells you you'll play basketball better if you wear Converse sneakers. It was awfully hard when he was at the top of his career, when he was the greatest. Right? He was phenomenal. To not believe him, but don't believe him. Not to believe them. Don't believe them. I want evidence, evidence, evidence. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Experts have to present evidence. Unless there's evidence to back up a claim, scientists will not give credence to the claim, no matter who's making it. Okay? And you cannot be overwhelmed by fancy jargon from people claiming to be experts. Obscure terms are not evidence. Terms like auditory processing problem. Anybody ever heard that one? Or obsessive compulsive depressive syndromes with that. Anybody heard those? Those aren't evidence, they're just words. What do you mean? Good scientist presents evidence that can be, in ways that can be understood and that make sense. Now I know most of us, okay, most of us say, oh my God, look at physicists, the way they, you can understand the word they're saying, but they adhere to this. Okay, obviously there are things you have to learn to understand scientific notation, etc. But someone who comes up with all kinds of obscure stuff and all kinds of weird notation, all kinds of weird, people say, get this away from me. It's got to be presented in ways that are clear and logical and that make sense. Okay? I've lost all my return links. Okay, it could be worse. Okay? So you have to be very careful about that. And wherever you are, you're going to get people, I'm the supervisor, I'm the principal, you're doing your practicum with me, I'm the expert. Well, it could be. I might have to do it your way, but just because you're the expert doesn't make it true. Just because it's in a book by somebody who claims to be an expert doesn't make it true. And you hear that all the time on the radio. I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm pushing this thing, and I'm pushing that thing. Well, could be. And I want to tell you, okay, so you have to be very, very careful what goes on. Now, part and parcel of that, well, I don't know if we'll finish this by the time the break comes, but we'll see. Okay, let's go back, is common sense. Use your common sense. Okay, common sense here. You have to get my picture out for a second, I think. Yeah. Okay. Common sense, what seems to make sense, is not evidence. Scientists rely on evidence, not what seems intuitively obvious to people. And often people who are experts, because they're experts, will say, well, this makes sense, it must be true. Because what makes sense to one person may not make sense to another, and different people have different ideas of what makes common sense. Come back to me. Oh, we'll get there, I promise. I'll do this slide again. And even when it makes sense to most people. Okay, I'm going to give you one notion, a notion that was during World War II, sociologists wanted to test some common sense. Come back to me, we don't need this. Okay? Here's what they said. The soldiers who are from the north and who have experienced blizzards and snowstorms and freezing cold will fight better in Europe during the winter than will soldiers from the deep south, like from Houston, from Texas, Houston and Alabama and southern Alabama, who have never had weather like that. And likewise, soldiers from the deep south will fight better in the summer in the South Pacific, where it's hot and miserable, unbearably muggy, unbearably hot, because they're used to weather like that. They'll fight better in the South Pacific than will soldiers from the north who've never had weather like that. Makes sense, doesn't it? Their standard, I think, was 75 or 80%, I can't remember, of the people that say, yeah, that makes sense. Doesn't that make sense to all of you? Makes sense, doesn't it? But when they went to test, it didn't make any difference. The overwhelming majority of soldiers did their job no matter where they were stationed. And the few who screwed up, it didn't make any difference where they were born or they were stationed. It was other things. So sure, the soldiers from the north were appalled by the weather and vice versa. But there wasn't one soldier from Houston who said, "Oh, bring on the heat and the humidity, I love it." And there wasn't one soldier from Rochester, New York who said, "Oh, bring on the snow, another blizzard, I love it." That's the second snowiest city in North America, right after Buffalo. I grew up in Rochester, went to the University of Buffalo. If I never see another snowflake, it won't be too soon. Oh, I love this snow. Get it away from me, okay? And people, if you saw Biloxi Blues, when Neil Simon said, "Oh my God, I'm so hot, I can't believe it." Of course, he grew up right, he lived right near Fort Dix, which was a major base. So they shipped to the Mississippi, obviously, right? That's how the Army worked. But in the end, they functioned. Even when they were shocked by the weather, they functioned. It didn't make any difference when it came to performance. I guess it must have been okay, we won the war, right? And their lieutenants said it, and their sergeants said it. It didn't make a difference. After the break, I'm going to give you another common sense notion to which 75 or 80 whatever people subscribed. And you'll see what's wrong with common sense. Okay, perfect timing. Okay.